All right, so today we're doing a deep dive into BERT.
Okay.
It's this model that's been kind of shaking things up in NLP, natural language processing.
Mm.
And we're going to try to break down why it's so important for programmers like you.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at excerpts from the original research paper.
Okay.
But don't worry, you don't need to be like an AI expert or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
We're just trying to get like the main idea of what BERT is
Yeah.
and why it matters for your work.
Weekend's good.
So,
The paper is called BERT, Pre-Training of Deep Bidirectional Transformers for Language Understanding.
wow, that's a mouthful.
It is.
So basically, what were the authors trying to do with this paper?
So essentially, they were trying to solve this fundamental problem in NLP,
Okay.
which is how to get computers to really understand language,
Yeah.
and especially the tricky relationships between words in a sentence.
Okay, so like, how is BERT different? What did it change?
So BERT stands for Bidirectional Encoder Representations from Transformers. The bidirectional part is really important.
Okay.
So before BERT, most models would read text like, we read a book, just left to right.
Yeah.
But BERT looks at a word and considers the words both before and after it at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like getting a much richer understanding of the context.
Yeah, makes sense.
Like figuring out if bank means like a river bank or a financial institution.
Yeah, for sure.
That kind of thing.
Okay, so that makes sense. But like, how does BERT actually like learn to do this?
Right.
The paper mentions this masked language model thing.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
So imagine you're playing this fill-in-the-blanks game.
Okay.
You see a sentence, but some words are missing, and you have to guess what they are.
Yeah.
That's basically what BERT does during training.
Okay.
It's fed a ton of text with random words masked out,
Mm.
and its job is to try to predict those missing words based on all the words around it.
So it's like a super powerful like autocomplete for sentences.
Plus-
But instead of just suggesting the next word, it's actually like filling in words within the sentence.
Exactly.
Oh.
And to make things even trickier,
Uh-huh.
sometimes they replace a word with a totally random word, or sometimes they just leave it unchanged.
Yeah.
This forces BERT to really deeply understand how words relate to each other.
So it's not just memorizing patterns. It's
Right.
actually understanding like
Exactly.
meaning.
Yeah.
Okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
But there's another piece to this training puzzle, right?
Yes.
Something about like next sentence prediction.
Right.
What's that all about?
So BERT is also trained to understand the relationship between sentences.
Okay.
So it's given two sentences,
Mm-hmm.
and it has to figure out if they logically follow each other or not.
Oh, interesting.
So this helps BERT learn about the flow of information.
Yeah.
Like, is this sentence a continuation of the previous one?
Yep.
Or is it a brand new idea?
I see.
So it's kind of like teaching BERT about narrative structure instead of just focusing on individual sentences.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So BERT is learning from all this text, is getting good at these tasks, but like, how do we actually use it to do something useful?
Yeah, so that's where fine-tuning comes in.
Okay.
So think of it like taking this BERT model that has this general understanding of language
Right.
and then specializing it for a specific job.
Okay.
So let's say you want to build a chatbot that can understand customer questions.
Mm-hmm.
You would take this pre-trained BERT
Yeah.
and you just add a small extra layer on top.
Okay.
And then you train that layer on a data set of actual customer conversations.
So you're not retraining BERT every single time.
Yeah.
You're just like adding a little tweak at the end.
Exactly. It's very efficient.
Okay.
And in the paper, they actually tested BERT on a bunch of different NLP tasks.
Yeah.
And it did amazingly well. Things like question answering,
Mm-hmm.
judging sentence similarity,
Right.
analyzing sentiment.
Okay.
BERT achieved state-of-the-art results on all of them.
Wow, that's impressive. But they also did these things called ablation studies.
Yes.
What were those about? Were they like trying to break BERT or something?
Not exactly. Think of it more like controlled experiments
Okay.
to see which parts of BERT are really important.
Okay.
So they would remove a piece of BERT or change something and
Yeah.
see how it affected the performance.
So like, what did they learn from those experiments?
Well, one thing they found is that removing the next sentence prediction task actually hurt performance quite a bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that shows how important it is for BERT to understand the relationships between sentences.
Mm-hmm.
They also tried a model that only read text from left to right.
Like the older model.
Yeah, like the older models.
Yeah.
And it performed way worse than the bidirectional BERT.
So that really shows that like BERT's approach of looking at words in both directions
Yes.
is like crucial to its success.
Absolutely.
Okay. And is there anything else interesting that they found out from these ablation studies?
Yeah, so they found that bigger BERT models generally performed better,
Oh, okay.
especially when they didn't have a lot of data for the specific task that
Interesting.
they were fine-tuning for.
So even if you only have a little bit of data for your specific problem,
Yeah,
a bigger, more general BERT is still like the way to go.
that's what they found.
Wow. Okay.
It's kind of like those big models. They have so much pre-existing knowledge
Right.
that even with limited new data,
Yeah.
they can apply their learning much better.
So it's like those larger models have like a broader base of knowledge, so they're better at generalizing,
Exactly.
even with limited new information.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So this is all super interesting for AI researchers and stuff like that.
Right.
But like, what about me, a programmer? Like, what's in it for me?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And that's where we'll focus next.
Okay.
So while BERT itself is complex,
Mm-hmm.
knowing what it can do can really spark some ideas for your own projects. Even if you're not building the next Google or something like that,
Right.
imagine what you could do with better code search that actually understands your intent.
Okay.
Documentation that's easier to navigate and understand,
Right.
or even chatbots that can have a real conversation about your code.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so there's a lot of possibilities.
Now that you mention it, like the possibilities are actually pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see how understanding BERT could be like a real asset, even if I'm not an AI expert.
Yeah,
So let's dig into those like programmer-centric use cases next.
sounds good. Okay, so let's talk about how this BERT thing is actually built.
Right.
Like under the hood, it uses something called a transformer,
Oh,
which has become like super popular in NLP.
I've heard of transformers.
Yeah,
Aren't those like neural networks that are good at dealing with sequences,
Right.
like text and stuff?
exactly. So BERT's architecture is basically a stack of these transformer encoders,
Okay.
and they experimented with different sizes. So they tested models with different numbers of layers,
Uh-huh.
hidden units,
Okay.
and attention heads.
Wait, hold on. Attention heads.
Yeah.
What are those?
So it's kind of like,
Sounds like BERT is paying attention in class or something.
yeah, it kind of is. So imagine you're reading a sentence.
Okay.
You naturally pay attention to certain words more than others, right?
Yeah.
Like the key words, the
Yeah.
verbs, the things that carry the most meaning.
Yeah, those are the words that like help you understand what's going on.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's what attention heads do in a transformer.
Oh, okay.
They allow the model to focus on specific parts of the input
Okay.
and figure out which words are most important for like understanding the meaning.
So it's like giving the model the ability to like selectively focus,
Yeah,
just like we do when we're reading.
exactly.
Well, that's cool. So they stack these transformers.
Right?
They gave them like attention,
Uh-huh.
and they experimented with different sizes. Like, what did they learn?
Yeah. So does size really matter that much?
It did. They found that bigger models consistently performed better across a bunch of different tasks,
Okay.
even when the data set for the specific task was small.
Oh, interesting. So bigger is better.
It seems that way.
But wait,
Yeah.
didn't we talk about how BERT can be fine-tuned on smaller data sets?
Yeah,
Doesn't that like contradict the idea that bigger is always better?
that's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
It highlights an interesting thing about BERT.
Okay.
Even though it's pre-trained on this massive amount of data,
Right.
the larger models are still really good at adapting to smaller, more focused data sets.
So it's like those larger models have a broader base of knowledge so they can like generalize better,
Exactly.
even with limited new information.
Think of it like this.
Okay.
Someone who's read a few books on a topic,
Mm-hmm.
they can learn from a new article.
Right.
But someone who's spent years immersed in the field,
Yeah.
they'll grasp the nuances much faster.
Right. They have that deeper understanding. Exactly. The larger BERT models have that kind of deep understanding.
Okay, that makes sense.
Hmm.
So even though a bigger model might seem like computationally expensive,
Right.
it could actually be more efficient in the long run because it can transfer its knowledge better.
Exactly. And remember, we're not retraining the entire model each time.
Yeah.
We're just fine-tuning a small part of it.
Right. That's the beauty of fine-tuning. Okay, so the paper also mentioned a feature-based approach.
Yes.
What's that about?
So fine-tuning is usually the preferred method.
Okay.
But there are cases where a feature-based approach might be more suitable.
So what is this feature-based approach?
How's
How's it different from fine-tuning?
Instead of fine-tuning the whole model on your specific task,
Right.
you can use BERT as a feature extractor.
Okay.
So you feed your data through the pre-trained BERT,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of tweaking it further, you just take its output, those rich representations it's learned,
Right.
and use those as input for a completely different machine learning model.
So it's like extracting the knowledge that BERT already
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
and using it as a starting point for something else.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this can be useful for tasks that don't fit neatly into BERT's structure,
Right.
or when you want to experiment with different types of models without retraining BERT every time.
So it gives you more flexibility
Yeah.
for the downstream task.
Exactly.
Okay. Did they test this feature-based approach in the paper?
They did.
Okay.
They tried it on a task called named entity recognition,
Right.
which involves identifying and classifying things like people,
Mm-hmm.
organizations, and locations in text.
So, and how did it compare to the fine-tuning approach?
It actually performed surprisingly well.
Oh, wow.
While fine-tuning the entire BERT model still got the best results,
Right.
the feature-based approach was very close,
Okay.
and they found that taking the representations from the top 4 layers of BERT
Mm-hmm.
and combining them worked best for this feature-based setup.
So even without fine-tuning, BERT's like internal knowledge was good enough
Yeah,
for near state-of-the-art results.
pretty much.
Wow.
It shows how powerful and versatile the representations learned by BERT during pre-training really are.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so
Now, getting a bit deeper into the technical details.
before we go too deep into the weeds, maybe let's shift gears a little bit
Okay.
and think about how all of this relates to like programmers specifically.
Yeah.
Like we've established that BERT is impressive and all that,
Right.
but what are some concrete examples of how it could actually be useful
Sure.
for like someone who writes code?
Absolutely. Let's make this practical.
Yeah.
So remember how we talked about BERT's ability to understand context
Right.
and relationships between words?
Yeah.
Imagine applying that to code search.
Okay, so instead of just matching keywords,
Yeah.
a BERT-powered search could actually understand what I'm really looking for
Exactly.
in a code snippet.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
It could completely change how we find and reuse code.
Wow.
And think about documentation.
Okay.
BERT could analyze code comments and documentation,
Mhm.
making it way easier to search and understand.
That would be a game changer
Yeah.
for anyone who's ever struggled to like decipher cryptic code comments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Eh.
And what about chatbots? Imagine a chatbot that can actually understand your code
Wow.
and answer your questions about it,
Okay.
or even help you debug.
Whoa, a code-savvy chatbot.
Yeah.
That would be super useful.
It's all possible thanks to BERT's ability to understand the nuances of language,
Sure.
even programming languages.
So even though the inner workings of BERT might seem really complex,
Yeah,
the applications for programmers are actually pretty clear.
right.
It's all about making code more searchable,
Uh-huh,
understandable,
right.
and even like conversational.
Yeah.
Who knew?
It's an exciting time to be a programmer.
For sure. And speaking of exciting, in the next part, we're going to dive into what BERT means for like the future of programming
Okay.
and the kinds of innovative applications we might see in the years to come.
Mm,
All right, so we've explored how BERT works,
right.
its architecture,
Yeah.
and even some potential applications for programmers.
Mm,
Now, I'm
Mhm.
curious,
Yeah.
like, what's the bigger picture here?
okay.
How has BERT changed the landscape of NLP, and like, what might the future hold,
Right.
especially for those of us in the software world?
BERT's impact has been huge. I
Right.
think it's not just about the specific tasks that it's really good at.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about the fundamental approach that it kind of introduced.
Okay.
Like pre-training on this massive amount of data,
Right.
and then fine-tuning for a specific task that's
Yeah.
become the standard for like tons of new language models.
So, like, BERT kind of showed everyone like a new way to approach language understanding,
Yeah.
leading to all these rapid advancements in areas like machine translation or text summarization.
Exactly. And it's even impacting fields like code generation.
Wow.
So the ripple effects of BERT are being felt everywhere.
That's really exciting. But it also makes me wonder about like the potential downsides.
Yeah.
Like as these models become more powerful,
Right.
how can we ensure that they're used responsibly?
That's a crucial question.
Yeah.
As programmers, we have this responsibility
Mm-hmm.
to be mindful of the ethical implications
Yeah,
of the tools that we build.
for sure.
So things like transparency,
Okay.
clear documentation,
Yeah.
and mechanisms for accountability are essential.
So it's not just about building something that works.
Yeah.
It's about building something that works well
Right.
and doesn't have like unintended consequences.
Exactly. We need to think about the impact of these technologies on individuals and society as a whole.
For sure.
It's a shared responsibility.
Well said. It sounds like BERT has opened up a world of possibilities, but we need to tread carefully.
Yeah.
and make sure that we're using this power for good.
I think that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
BERT is a testament to, like, human ingenuity
Right.
and the potential of AI.
Yeah.
But it's also a reminder that we need to be thoughtful and ethical
For sure.
in our approach.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive into the world of BERT.
Yeah, it has.
We've learned about its inner workings,
Mm-hmm.
its strengths,
Right.
and even the challenges that it presents
Yeah.
for programmers especially.
Yeah.
BERT offers some really incredible possibilities,
Absolutely.
from better code search
Mhm.
to AI-powered coding assistance.
Exciting.
Really is. And it's clear that BERT and its successors
Yeah.
are going to have a major impact on how we write, understand,
Okay. Yeah.
and even interact with code.
For sure.
It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you.
Likewise.
As programmers, we're at the forefront of this technological revolution.
Yeah.
And it's up to us to shape the future of AI in a responsible and beneficial way. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into BERT.
Thanks for having me.
We encourage you to keep exploring this fascinating field
Yeah.
and to think critically about the role of AI in the future of programming.
For sure.
Until next time, keep coding,
Yes.
keep learning,
Definitely.
and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.